The fire didn't take my farm, it revealed my family. By the time the sun came up over Miller County, all that was left of my red barn was a skeleton of blackened beams and a smell that clung to the back of my throat like burnt toast left too long in the toaster. I stood at the edge of what used to be 40 acres of working land, soybeans to the east, corn to the west, and the farmhouse my husband built with his own hands sitting in the middle of it all, and I realized something strange. I wasn't crying. The wind moved through the ashes in small gray swirls. Sirens had stopped an hour earlier. The volunteer firefighters had done what they could. The county inspector said it looked like an electrical issue in the equipment shed. "These old wires," he'd said gently, as if he were talking about me. I nodded. I've lived in Iowa my whole life. I know the sound of things ending. What I didn't expect was the sound of my daughter-in-law's voice cutting through the morning like a crisp sheet of paper. "Well," Rachel said, wrapping her coat tighter around her, "I guess this makes you basically homeless now." She said it quietly. Almost thoughtfully. As if she were commenting on the weather. My son David stood beside her, hands in his jacket pockets, staring at the smoke still rising from the field. He didn't correct her. He didn't look at me. He just nodded once, the way he does when someone else has already decided what's true. I brushed a thin layer of ash off my sleeve. "It's just a house," I said. It wasn't. That farmhouse had 12-foot ceilings in the kitchen because my husband, Tom, said tall rooms made small worries feel smaller. It had a porch that ran the length of the front, wide enough for 3 rocking chairs and a Sunday afternoon that never seemed to end. We bought this land in 1983 with a down payment scraped together from Tom's overtime at the mill and the tips I saved from waitressing at the diner off Route 6. 5 acres at first. Then 10. Then 20. By the time we hit 40, we thought we'd made it. Rachel pulled out her phone. I watched her thumb move quickly across the screen. "We'll need to figure out insurance," she said. "And whether it even makes sense to rebuild. Property values are strong right now. Maybe this is an opportunity." An opportunity. I looked at the ground where my herb garden used to be. Basil. Rosemary. Mint that refused to die no matter how harsh the winter. David cleared his throat. "Mom, you can stay with us. For now. For now. I've learned that the words people choose when they think you're down tell you more than anything they say when you're strong." "Thank you," I said. I meant it. I've always meant what I say. We drove back to town in silence. Their SUV smelled like new leather and whatever citrus air freshener Rachel preferred. I could still smell smoke in my hair. When we pulled into their driveway, Rachel leaned closer to David and whispered something she thought I couldn't hear. "Now she doesn't have any leverage," she said. Leverage. I stepped out of the car slowly. I may be 68, but my hearing is just fine. Inside their house, 3 bedrooms, open concept, granite countertops Rachel likes to mention, I sat at the kitchen island while she made coffee. She didn't ask how I was feeling. She asked if I had copies of the deed. I folded my hands together and stared at the steam rising from my mug. I thought about the first winter Tom and I spent in that farmhouse when the pipes froze and we heated soup on a camping stove. I thought about the time David was 8 and tried to milk a cow wearing his Sunday shoes. I thought about the way Tom used to say, "Land doesn't leave you. People do." Rachel slid a legal pad across the counter. "We should list out your assets," she said. "Just so we're clear. Just so we're clear." The words echoed in my head. Clear about what? Clear about who I was without my house? Without my barn? Without the land my husband and I bled for in small, ordinary ways over 40 years? I nodded slowly. "Of course," I said. I took a sip of coffee. It was too sweet. Rachel always adds flavored creamer. I prefer it black. David finally looked at me. "We'll figure it out, Mom," he said. He meant financially. I could tell. I smiled at him. I didn't tell him what I was already starting to understand. The fire had taken wood and shingles and beams. It hadn't taken memory. It hadn't taken loyalty. And it certainly hadn't taken every connection I'd ever made. Later that afternoon, while Rachel was on the phone with an insurance adjuster and David was at work, I sat alone at their dining table and opened the small address book I've carried in my purse for 25 years. It's the old kind. Worn leather cover. Names written in pen. Some crossed out. Some circled. I flipped past neighbors. Past church friends. Past suppliers. And then I stopped at a name I hadn't called in decades. Ethan Whitmore. I could still picture him at 8 years old, skinny knees, oversized glasses, sitting at my kitchen table doing homework while his parents fought through another evening. I used to babysit him after school when his family rented the house down the road before they moved to Chicago. He used to say my farmhouse felt safe. I traced the number with my finger. It might not even be his anymore. People change numbers. They change cities. They change loyalties. But I've learned something about boys who grow up remembering who showed them kindness when no one else did. They don't forget. Rachel's voice drifted from the other room. Yes, we'll need full documentation, she was saying. She doesn't have much left. She doesn't have much left. I closed the address book carefully. I may have lost my house. I may have lost my barn. But I hadn't lost everything. Not even close. I reached for my phone. The number rang longer than I expected. I almost hung up after the fourth tone because pride is a stubborn thing, especially at my age. Then a voice answered, calm and steady, the kind of voice that has spent years making decisions people listen to. Whitmore, he said. I had not heard that name spoken aloud in so long that for a moment I forgot why I was calling. Ethan, I said, my voice quieter than I intended. There was a pause, not long, just enough for memory to move through it. Miss Maggie, he asked. He still called me that. I sat back in the dining chair and looked out at Rachel's manicured backyard with its decorative gravel and trimmed shrubs. Yes, I said. It is me. The line went silent again, but this time it felt different. Not distant. Focused. Are you all right? He asked. No one else had asked me that. Not the inspector. Not Rachel. Not even David. My farm burned down, I said simply. I have always believed that facts do not need decoration. I heard about the storms in the Midwest, he replied. Are you safe? I am safe, I said. The house is not. I did not tell him about the word homeless. I did not tell him about leverage. I did not need to. He was quiet for a moment longer. I could almost picture him in some glass office in New York or San Francisco, looking out over a skyline that had nothing to do with cornfields or gravel roads. Why did you not call sooner? He asked. I smiled at that. I had not even called yet, not truly. Because I was not sure I needed to, I said. And now? He asked. I folded my hand over the old address book still open beside me. Now I am not sure what burned down, I said. The barn, yes. The farmhouse, yes. But something else feels off. He did not rush me. That was something I remembered about him as a child. When his parents argued through thin rental walls, he would sit at my kitchen table and wait for the noise to settle. He understood patience before most adults did. Tell me, he said. I told him about the inspector's guess. I told him about the insurance paperwork Rachel was so eager to review. I told him about the whisper in the car, about leverage. I did not accuse anyone. I simply described what I saw and heard. When I finished, he did not offer sympathy. He offered clarity. Miss Maggie, he said, do you still have the policy number? I closed my eyes and pictured the metal filing cabinet in what used to be my office, second drawer down. I have copies in a safe deposit box at First County Bank, I said. And digital copies on a drive I keep with me. Rachel had not asked about that. Good, he replied. I could hear the faint sound of a keyboard on his end. Do not sign anything. Do not agree to any sale. Do not authorize any change. I looked toward the hallway where Rachel's voice carried faintly as she discussed documentation. I have not signed anything, I said. I have signed my name on enough papers in this life to know when to wait. He gave a small breath of something that sounded almost like a laugh. I am going to have my team look into the claim, he said. Insurance filings leave trails. Electrical reports leave trails. So do recent beneficiary updates. Beneficiary updates. The words landed softly but heavily. I thought about how Rachel had insisted last year that I simplify paperwork after Tom passed. How she had offered to help organize accounts. I felt no anger. Just alignment. Pieces moving into place the way they do when you finally see the edge of a puzzle. Ethan, I said, I am not asking you for money. I needed him to understand that. I have never been comfortable asking for what I cannot earn. I know, he replied. You never asked for anything. That is why I am listening. Outside, a lawn service truck passed by, the sound of its engine low and steady. Everything in this neighborhood looked orderly. Controlled. Nothing like the blackened outline of my land that morning. There is something else, he added. My company has been evaluating agricultural investments in sustainable grain production in Iowa. We have been looking at properties with existing water rights and long-term yield history. I let that settle between us. 40 acres. Water access. Decades of production records. My land still has value, I said. It was not a question. More than you think, he answered. But value attracts attention. Sometimes from people close to you. I traced the rim of my coffee mug with my finger. It had gone cold. What should I do? I asked. It was the first time that day I had asked anyone that question. Go to your bank tomorrow morning, he said. Access your safe deposit box. Do not tell anyone you are going. I will have counsel contact you by noon. Quietly. Counsel. Contact. Quietly. I felt something inside me shift, not in fear but in steadiness. Rachel stepped into the kitchen just then, her heels clicking against tile. Insurance wants a full inventory, she said brightly. We need to estimate losses accurately. I covered the phone's microphone with my hand. I will handle my own inventory, I said. Her smile tightened for a fraction of a second before returning to its usual curve. Of course, she replied. I uncovered the phone. I need to go, I told Ethan. I will call you tomorrow. Miss Maggie, he said before I could hang up. You took care of me when no one else did. Let me return the favor. I ended the call and slipped the phone into my purse. Rachel was already making notes on her legal pad. She looked up at me. Who was that? She asked casually. I met her eyes. An old friend, I said. And for the first time since the smoke cleared, I felt certain that the fire had not been the end of my story. It had been the beginning of theirs. I woke up before Rachel did. I have always been an early riser. Farm life trains you that way. Even without a barn to tend or livestock to feed, my body still understands the quiet hours before sunrise. The house was still dark when I stepped into the kitchen. I did not turn on the lights. I did not want to announce movement. I poured myself a glass of water and stood by the window, watching the faint outline of neighboring rooftops slowly come into view as the sky shifted from charcoal to pale blue. I thought about the safe deposit box at First County Bank. I had opened it the week after Tom passed, hands steady, mind clear. I had placed copies of the deed, the insurance policy, the original water rights documentation, and a small envelope with handwritten notes inside. Notes Tom had made about long-term land planning. He trusted paper. He trusted ink. He trusted that someday, if something went wrong, would know where to look. By 7:30 in the morning I was dressed in a navy cardigan and sensible shoes. I left a short note on the kitchen counter. It said only that I was going to town to run errands. I did not specify which errands. Rachel came down the stairs as I reached for my purse. "You are up early," she said, tying the belt of her robe. "Old habits," I replied. She glanced at the clock on the oven. "If you are going to the insurance office, I can call ahead," she offered. I met her gaze calmly. "I am not going to the insurance office," I said. "Just the bank." She paused for half a second too long. "For what?" she asked lightly. "Personal matters," I answered. I did not elaborate. I did not need to. The drive to First County Bank took 12 minutes. I counted them. Past the gas station on Miller Road. Past the church with the white steeple Tom helped repaint one summer. Past the hardware store that still had our old account on file. The bank parking lot was nearly empty when I arrived. Inside, the air smelled faintly of carpet cleaner and coffee. The teller recognized me immediately. "Miss Collins," she said warmly. "I heard about the fire." "I am so sorry." I nodded once. "Thank you," I said. "I need access to my safe deposit box." She led me to the vault without asking questions. I appreciated that. Some kindness is loud. Some kindness is quiet. This was the quiet kind. The metal drawer slid out smoothly. I lifted the lid and looked at the contents exactly as I had left them. Organized. Labeled. Untouched. I removed the insurance policy first. My eyes moved over the beneficiary section. I felt my breath slow. The primary beneficiary had been updated 8 months ago. The name listed was not mine. It was David Collins. I did not react outwardly. I simply read the line again to be certain. The signature authorizing the update looked like mine. The handwriting was similar. But I know my own signature. I know the pressure of my pen strokes. This one was careful. Too careful. I placed the policy back into the box and removed the digital backup drive. I slipped both into my purse. Then I took out the small envelope Tom had left behind. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a note written in his uneven script. It said, "If anything ever feels wrong, trust your instincts before you trust anyone else." I closed the envelope and placed it back where it belonged. In the private viewing room adjacent to the vault, I called Ethan. He answered on the second ring. "I have the documents," I said. There was a beneficiary change. I heard the faint click of a keyboard on his end. "When?" he asked. 8 months ago. "Did you authorize it?" he asked evenly. "No," I said. I did not add anything else. Silence can carry weight if you let it. "All right," he said. "Do not confront anyone yet. I am sending a legal team to review the policy and the claim report. We will request the original authorization form from the insurer." I looked down at the paper in my hand. "The signature is not mine," I said quietly. "I believe you," he replied. That was the second time someone had said that to me in 24 hours. It mattered more than I expected. When I left the bank, the morning sun was higher, bright and indifferent. I sat in my car for a moment before starting the engine. I did not feel rage. I did not feel heartbreak. I felt clarity. The fire had exposed more than beams and wiring. It had exposed timing. 8 months ago was when Rachel had insisted on helping me reorganize paperwork after Tom's funeral. She had sat at my dining table with a neat stack of forms and a sympathetic expression. I remember signing some pages. I remember declining others. I remember her saying, "This will make things easier for everyone." Easier for everyone. I drove back toward town with steady hands. By the time I pulled into David's driveway, Rachel was already outside, phone pressed to her ear. She ended the call when she saw me. "Did you get what you needed?" she asked. I stepped out of the car and closed the door gently behind me. Yes, I said. I did. She studied my face as if looking for cracks. I gave her none. Good, she replied, her smile precise. Insurance is going to want everything documented properly. I nodded once. I agree, I said. And for the first time since the flames had risen over my fields, I understood that the fire was not the only thing that would be investigated. The afternoon settled into the house with a kind of quiet that felt staged. Rachel moved around the kitchen making calls in a tone that suggested efficiency, not grief. David came home early from work, loosened his tie, and asked me if I had heard anything new from the insurance company. I told him I had visited the bank instead. He nodded slowly, as if that detail needed to be stored somewhere for later. I sat at the dining table with my purse resting against my leg, the digital drive and copies of the policy inside it, and I watched them move through their routines. There is something about observing your own child from a distance that changes the air around you. I remembered David at 10 years old, standing in the middle of a muddy field, holding a broken fence post and insisting he could fix it himself. He used to look at me before making decisions, searching my face for approval or guidance. Now he looked at Rachel. Insurance says they will send an adjuster to inspect what is left of the property, Rachel said, flipping through her notes. They will want a detailed list of lost equipment and structures. It might take a few weeks. A few weeks. I thought about the beneficiary change dated 8 months ago. Did they mention the policy update from last year? I asked calmly. Rachel's pen paused mid-air. What update? She asked, her tone light but sharpened at the edges. David glanced between us. There was a beneficiary change, I said, keeping my voice steady. It lists you, David. The room felt smaller for a moment. Rachel recovered first. Well, that makes sense, she said quickly. You told us you wanted things simplified after Dad passed. David is your only child. She smiled as if the logic explained everything. I folded my hands together. I did not authorize a change to that section, I said. David frowned. Mom, maybe you just forgot. It was a difficult time. Difficult time. I considered that phrase. Grief can blur details. It can make days run together. But grief does not change the shape of your own name. I did not forget, I said quietly. Rachel stepped closer to the table. Let us not make this into something it is not, she said. We were only trying to help. I studied her expression. It was composed. Controlled. Almost rehearsed. Help with what? I asked. With protecting assets, she replied. If something happened, it would be easier for David to manage the claim. If something happened. I thought about the way she had stood in the driveway the morning of the fire, calculating rather than comforting. I thought about the whisper in the car. Leverage. David rubbed his forehead. Mom, no one is trying to take anything from you, he said. His voice carried frustration, not cruelty. That made it harder. I nodded slowly. I understand, I replied. Then we should request the original authorization form from the insurer, I added. Just to be clear. Rachel's jaw tightened briefly. That could delay the payout, she said. We need those funds to decide next steps. Next steps. I felt Tom's note in my memory like a steady hand on my shoulder. Trust your instincts before you trust anyone else. I am not in a hurry, I said. The land has stood for 40 years. It can stand a little longer. Rachel closed her notebook. Do you think we would forge your signature? She asked, her tone suddenly sharper. I met her eyes without blinking. I am not accusing anyone, I said. I am asking for documentation. Silence settled between us. David looked tired. He sat down across from me. Mom, he said more softly, what are you thinking? I considered the question carefully. I am thinking that fires do not rewrite ownership, I said. And paperwork should match intention. Rachel let out a slow breath through her nose. Fine, she said. Request the form. She picked up her phone and walked into the hallway. I heard her speaking in a lower voice, too far to make out words. David leaned closer to me. You trust me, right? He asked. That question hurt more than anything else that day. I reached across the table and placed my hand over his. I raised you, I said. Trust is not the issue. He looked confused. He always did when conversations moved beneath the surface. Then what is? He asked. I withdrew my hand gently. Timing, I said. That evening, after dinner, I stepped outside onto their back patio. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of cut grass. I thought about the land that used to stretch beneath my feet, the irrigation lines, the rows planted with care, the small office where Tom kept yield reports going back decades. I thought about Ethan's voice on the phone, calm and deliberate. I thought about legal teams and trails left by signatures. Inside the house, I could hear Rachel's laughter drifting from the living room as she spoke to someone on the phone. It sounded light, unburdened. I stood there in the dark a little longer and realized something steady and certain. If the fire had been an accident, the truth would confirm it. If it had not, the truth would surface just the same. And either way, I would not be the one standing in ashes when it did. The next morning began with a knock at the door that did not belong to Rachel's rhythm. It was firm but unhurried. I was already awake, seated at the small desk in the guest room with Tom's note unfolded beside me. Rachel moved faster than I did, heels striking the hardwood as she crossed the hallway. When she opened the door, her voice shifted into polite surprise. Can I help you? She asked. A man introduced himself in a calm, professional tone. My name is Daniel Mercer. I represent Whitmore Agricultural Holdings. I am here to review documentation regarding the Collins property. There was a pause long enough for tension to enter the house like a draft under the door. I stepped into the hallway before Rachel could respond further. Daniel was in his early 40s, dressed in a simple navy suit, carrying a leather portfolio. Nothing flashy. Nothing dramatic. Just prepared. Miss Collins? He asked when he saw me. Yes, I said. Please come in. Rachel's posture stiffened. Whitmore, she repeated carefully. As in Ethan Whitmore? I met her eyes briefly. An old friend, I said again. Daniel sat at the dining table where Rachel had spread out her legal pad and neatly stacked insurance correspondence. He did not comment on the arrangement. He simply opened his portfolio and placed a digital tablet on the table. We have requested the original authorization form from the insurer, he said evenly. They were able to provide a scanned copy this morning. Rachel's hand tightened around her pen. David had not yet left for work and stood near the kitchen counter, listening. Daniel rotated the tablet toward me. I leaned forward and examined the document. The signature was there in dark ink. My name written carefully, each letter deliberate. Too deliberate. That is not my signature, I said calmly. Daniel nodded once. We have already initiated a forensic handwriting review, he replied. Preliminary indicators suggest irregularities in stroke pressure and letter formation. Rachel let out a short laugh that did not reach her eyes. This is ridiculous, she said. Maggie signed dozens of papers last year. It was an emotional time. Of course it might look different. Emotional time. I folded my hands in my lap. I was grieving, I said. I was not confused. David shifted uncomfortably. Rachel, maybe we should just wait for the review, he said quietly. Rachel turned toward him sharply before smoothing her expression. I am only saying we need the payout processed quickly, she insisted. Rebuilding decisions cannot wait forever. Daniel glanced down at another document. There is also the matter of the electrical inspection report, he added. The insurer noted that the wiring in the equipment shed had passed safety inspection 9 months ago. I looked up. Passed? I asked. Yes, Daniel said. No deficiencies reported. Rachel crossed her arms. Old wiring can still fail, she said quickly. Especially in rural structures. That is correct, Daniel replied calmly. However, the report indicates recent replacement of key components. The air in the room changed. David frowned. Replacement, he repeated. Daniel tapped the screen gently. According to supplier records, a new breaker unit was installed 8 weeks ago. 8 weeks. I had been in town that day for a church fundraiser. Rachel had offered to oversee maintenance appointments while I was away. I remembered thanking her. I remembered trusting her. Why would that matter? Rachel asked, her voice thinner now. Daniel met her gaze steadily. Because updated systems typically reduce the likelihood of failure, he said. Which is why the insurer has flagged the claim for extended review. Extended review. Rachel set her pen down with controlled force. So what are you implying? She asked. Daniel did not raise his voice. I am implying nothing, he said. I am gathering facts. I sat very still. I felt no triumph. Only confirmation that questions were no longer mine alone. David ran a hand through his hair. Mom, he said softly, did you know about the breaker replacement? I shook my head. I was told it was routine maintenance, I replied. Rachel's eyes flickered toward me, calculating. It was routine, she said quickly. The contractor recommended it. Daniel made a brief note. We will request contractor statements as well, he said. Silence settled over the table again. Outside, a delivery truck rolled past, ordinary and unaware. Inside, something invisible had shifted. Rachel stood abruptly. This is absurd, she said. Are we being investigated? Daniel closed his portfolio with measured calm. Miss Collins is exercising her right to verify documentation, he said. That is all. He rose from his chair and turned toward me. We will keep you informed, he said quietly. For now, do not engage in further policy discussions without counsel present. I nodded once. Thank you. I replied. When he left, the door closed with a soft click that sounded louder than it should have. Rachel stared at me, her expression tight. You went behind our backs, she said. I considered that carefully. No, I replied. I went to the truth. David looked between us, his certainty thinning. Rachel exhaled sharply and walked toward the bedroom without another word. David remained standing in the kitchen, shoulders slumped. Mom, he said after a moment, what is happening? I looked at my son, the boy who once believed broken fences could be fixed with enough effort. We are finding out, I said. And for the first time since the smoke rose over my land, I could see that the fire had not only burned wood. It had burned through assumptions, leaving only what could withstand the heat of scrutiny. The house felt different after Daniel left. Not louder. Not quieter. Just aware. Rachel stayed in the bedroom most of the afternoon, her footsteps pacing in short, sharp patterns across the ceiling above the living room. David left for work without finishing his coffee. He kissed my cheek before he walked out the door, but it felt automatic, like muscle memory rather than intention. I remained at the dining table long after the front door closed behind him. The tablet screen Daniel had shown us replayed in my mind. The signature. The inspection report. The breaker replacement 8 weeks before the fire. 8 weeks is not a long time. It is barely 2 pay cycles. Barely enough time for crops to push through early soil. I thought about the day Rachel said the contractor was coming. She had insisted I spend the afternoon in town, said she would handle it. I remembered bringing home a lemon pie from the bakery that day. I remembered her thanking me. I do not remember signing anything about electrical systems. Around 3 in the afternoon my phone vibrated gently on the table. It was Ethan. We have additional information, he said without greeting. His voice was steady, but there was a sharper edge beneath it. The contractor who installed the breaker unit is not licensed in this county. I absorbed that slowly. Not licensed? I repeated. Correct, he said. He has completed jobs under subcontract arrangements, but the invoice for your property lists him as the primary technician. I looked toward the hallway, where Rachel's door remained closed. Who hired him? I asked. There was a pause. The work order was submitted under your daughter-in-law's email address, Ethan replied. I closed my eyes for a moment. Not in shock. In confirmation. And the payment? I asked. Transferred from a joint household account held by David and Rachel Collins, he said. Joint household account. Not from my farm account. Not from my personal savings. I let out a slow breath. Does that prove anything? I asked. Not yet, he said. But it establishes involvement. Involvement. I have learned that truth rarely arrives as a dramatic revelation. It arrives in documents. In dates. In signatures. In small details that refuse to align. The insurance company has placed a temporary hold on the payout, Ethan continued. They will conduct a formal review. I nodded even though he could not see me. Rachel will not like that, I said. That is not your concern, he replied gently. After we ended the call, I remained seated, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the faint ticking of the kitchen clock. I did not feel anger. I felt steadiness. When Rachel finally emerged from the bedroom, her expression was carefully arranged. Insurance just called, she said. They are delaying the payout. Apparently there are questions about the electrical work. I met her gaze evenly. That makes sense, I said. Does it? She asked, her voice tightening. It seems excessive. I folded my hands together. Documentation takes time, I replied. You said that yourself. She studied my face as if searching for a reaction she could use. I gave her none. Are you trying to suggest I did something wrong? She asked finally. I considered my answer carefully. I am suggesting that the truth will be documented, I said. That benefits everyone. Her composure cracked just slightly. You think I would sabotage your own property? She asked, incredulous. The word sabotage hung in the air, introduced by her, not by me. I tilted my head slightly. I did not use that word, I said. Silence stretched between us. David returned home earlier than usual that evening. Rachel met him at the door, speaking quickly in low tones. I did not strain to hear. I had learned that listening without reacting often reveals more than confrontation. During dinner, David's movements were distracted. He pushed food around his plate, rather than eating it. The insurance hold is temporary, Rachel said brightly, attempting to regain control of the narrative. It is just standard procedure. David looked at me instead of her. Mom, he said quietly, did you bring in outside counsel? I set my fork down gently. I sought advice, I replied. Rachel exhaled sharply. You involved a billionaire, she said, the word carrying accusation rather than awe. You made this bigger than it needed to be. I met her eyes. It was already big, I said. 40 acres is not small. David rubbed his temples. I do not understand why we are escalating this, he said. I studied my son carefully. Because I do not understand why paperwork changed without my consent, I replied. And I do not understand why a breaker was replaced without my knowledge. His gaze shifted toward Rachel. For a moment, uncertainty flickered across his face. Rachel reached for his hand under the table. We were helping, she said softly. Everything we did was to protect the family. Protect the family. I thought about that phrase long after dinner ended and the house fell into uneasy quiet. I stood by the guest room window and looked out at the dark street, lined with identical houses and evenly spaced porch lights. My land had been uneven. Imperfect. Alive. Whatever had happened, whether through intention or carelessness, had set forces in motion that no longer belonged to whispers. Documentation was moving. Reviews were underway. And for the first time since Rachel called me homeless, I understood something clearly. If anyone believed I would retreat quietly into the margins of my own life, they had mistaken age for weakness. They had mistaken silence for surrender. And the fire, whatever its origin, had done one unexpected thing. It had removed every illusion. The following week unfolded slowly, the way heavy weather does before it finally breaks. The insurance company sent a formal notice confirming that the claim was under extended investigation pending review of documentation and contractor records. Rachel read the letter aloud in the kitchen with forced composure, emphasizing phrases like routine verification and procedural compliance as if repetition might shrink their meaning. David stood beside her, jaw tight, arms folded across his chest. I sat at the table with my hands resting lightly on the wood surface and listened without interruption. When she finished, she placed the letter down with deliberate care. "This could take months," she said. "Do you understand what that means?" I understood more than she realized. It meant paper trails would be examined. It meant signatures would be analyzed. It meant timelines would be questioned. "It means they are being thorough," I replied. Rachel shook her head. "It means everything is frozen," she said. "Rebuilding is impossible without funds." I tilted my head slightly. "Rebuilding does not begin with money," I said. "It begins with clarity." David exhaled slowly. "Mom, what are you hoping to find?" he asked. I looked at my son carefully, studying the lines that had deepened around his eyes in recent years. "I am hoping to find nothing," I answered honestly. "I am hoping this was an accident." Rachel let out a soft, incredulous laugh. "Then why involve attorneys?" she asked. I met her gaze evenly. "Because hope is not documentation," I said. The days that followed revealed small shifts in behavior. Rachel made more private phone calls, stepping outside to speak in hushed tones near the driveway. David spent longer hours at work. When he was home, he avoided direct conversation about the farm. I did not press him. I spent my mornings reviewing old yield reports from digital backups Ethan's team had retrieved. Decades of production history, water rights confirmations, soil analyses. Numbers do not lie easily. They require effort to distort. On Thursday afternoon my phone rang again. It was Daniel Mercer. "We have received preliminary results from the handwriting analysis," he said. I stood by the guest room window as he spoke, watching a school bus pass at the end of the street. "The signature on the beneficiary update does not match your historical samples," he continued. "There are measurable inconsistencies in stroke pattern and pen pressure." I closed my eyes briefly. "So it was altered," I said quietly. "It appears so," he replied. Additionally, the contractor listed on the breaker replacement invoice has stated he was contacted by a woman identifying herself as property manager for the Collins farm. Property manager. I had never appointed one. Did he name her? I asked. "He confirmed the contact email matches your daughter-in-law's address," Daniel said. I felt no surge of triumph. Only a settling, like dust after wind. "What happens now?" I asked. "The insurer will likely escalate the case to their internal fraud review division," he said carefully. "Law enforcement involvement is possible, though that is their decision." I leaned my forehead lightly against the cool glass of the window. I had never imagined my family would appear in any file labeled fraud. "Thank you," I said. When I returned to the kitchen, Rachel was seated at the island, scrolling through her phone. She looked up immediately. "Who was that?" she asked. "Counsel," I replied. Her posture stiffened. "And?" she pressed. I walked to the sink and poured myself a glass of water before answering. "The signature on the policy update does not match mine," I said calmly. The silence that followed was heavy and immediate. David, who had just entered from the garage, froze mid-step. "What?" he asked. Rachel's face paled, then flushed. That is impossible, she said sharply. The analysis is preliminary, I replied. But it suggests irregularities. David looked at Rachel. You handled that paperwork, he said slowly. She stood abruptly. Are you accusing me? She demanded. I held up a hand gently. I am stating facts, I said. The documentation does not align. Rachel's eyes flashed. You think I would risk everything for an insurance payout? She asked. The question lingered in the air. I answered carefully. I think decisions were made without my knowledge, I said. And I think those decisions have consequences. David ran a hand through his hair again, the gesture now familiar. Rachel, tell me this is a mistake, he said. She stared at him, anger and calculation moving across her face in quick succession. It is a misunderstanding, she insisted. Maybe the contractor filed something incorrectly. Maybe the insurer misprocessed the form. Maybe. The word felt thin. I stepped closer to the table, resting my fingertips lightly on its surface. If it is a misunderstanding, the documentation will correct it, I said quietly. If it is not, the documentation will reveal that as well. Rachel grabbed her purse from the counter. I need air, she said, and walked out the front door without another word. The door closed with more force than necessary. David sank into a chair, staring at the table. Mom, he whispered, what is happening? I looked at him for a long moment before answering. The truth is happening, I said. Outside, the evening light stretched long across identical lawns and trimmed hedges. Inside, the air felt different. Not tense. Exposed. Whatever had been built quietly over the past year was now visible under review. And for the first time since the fire, I saw uncertainty not in myself, but in the faces of those who once believed I had lost everything. The house remained quiet long after Rachel returned that evening. She did not speak to me directly. She moved through rooms with deliberate control, opening and closing cabinets as though sound itself could re-establish authority. David sat at the kitchen table with his elbows resting on the surface, staring at nothing in particular. I prepared tea for myself, the slow ritual grounding in its simplicity. Boil water. Steep leaves. Wait. I had learned that patience unsettles those who expect panic. The next morning brought another letter, this time delivered by certified mail. The envelope bore the logo of the insurance company in crisp blue ink. Rachel intercepted it before I reached the door, but she could not open it without my presence. It is addressed to you, she said tightly, holding it out. I accepted it without haste and slid it open with a butter knife. The letter inside was concise. It informed me that the claim had been referred to a special investigations unit due to discrepancies in beneficiary authorization and contractor documentation. It also requested that I appear for a formal recorded statement regarding recent policy changes and maintenance activities. Rachel read the letter over my shoulder. I felt her breath shorten slightly at the phrase recorded statement. David leaned closer, reading silently. This is getting out of hand, Rachel said, her voice low but strained. It is procedure, I replied. When documents conflict, questions follow. She stepped back from me as though the paper itself carried accusation. You involved outsiders, she said. You made this into something legal. I folded the letter carefully and placed it on the table. It became legal when paperwork was altered, I said evenly. David looked at Rachel again, uncertainty now more visible than denial. Did you sign something for Mom? He asked quietly. Rachel's expression hardened. I facilitated paperwork, she said. She was overwhelmed. I was protecting our future. Our future. I considered that phrase. My farm had been my present, not merely an inheritance to calculate. Protection requires consent, I said softly. Rachel's composure slipped for a moment. Everything I did was for stability, she insisted. You would have left everything disorganized. I studied her face. I saw ambition there. I saw fear. I did not see remorse. Stability built on someone else's signature is not stable, I replied. The room fell silent again. Later that afternoon Daniel called to confirm the date of my recorded statement. It would take place at the insurer's regional office 30 miles away. He advised me to bring copies of all documentation and to answer only what was asked. His tone remained steady, professional. When I ended the call, Rachel was standing at the doorway listening. "Are they treating you like a suspect?" she asked sharply. I shook my head. "They are verifying facts," I said. "That includes everyone." Her eyes narrowed. "You are risking David's reputation," she said. I turned toward her fully then. "No," I answered calmly. "Reputation is risked by action, not inquiry." That evening David approached me alone on the back patio. The sky was streaked with soft orange light fading into dusk. He looked older than his 40 years. "Mom," he said quietly, "if Rachel made a mistake, I need to know." I watched him carefully. "Then you should ask her directly," I said. He exhaled slowly. "She says she was trying to streamline everything," he said. "After Dad passed, you were not yourself." I let that sit between us. "Grief does not erase comprehension," I replied. "It sharpens it." He nodded faintly but did not respond. Inside, Rachel was on the phone again, her voice low, urgent. I did not strain to hear. The truth was moving now without my effort. Documentation had its own momentum. The insurer's review would pull contractor statements, email records, timestamps. Digital footprints do not disappear simply because someone wishes they would. The following morning, as I prepared to leave for the recorded statement, Rachel stood at the doorway watching me. "You do not have to do this," she said quietly. I paused. "Yes," I replied. "I do." She crossed her arms tightly. "And if this escalates?" she asked. I looked at her steadily. "Then it escalates," I said. There was no anger in my voice. Only resolve. I stepped outside into the cool morning air and closed the door behind me. As I drove toward the regional office, fields stretched on either side of the highway, rows of early growth reaching upward despite recent storms. Land recovers. It waits. It grows again when conditions allow. Whatever had been planted in secret over the past year was now surfacing in the light. And for the first time since the fire, I did not feel like a displaced woman staying in someone else's guest room. I felt like the owner of a story that had not ended, only shifted direction. I arrived at the insurance company's regional office 10 minutes early. The building was plain brick with tinted windows that reflected the pale Iowa sky. Inside, the lobby smelled faintly of coffee and copier toner. A receptionist directed me to a small conference room with a long table, a recording device placed neatly in the center. Daniel Mercer was already seated, reviewing a folder with quiet focus. Across from him sat a woman in a gray blazer who introduced herself as part of the Special Investigations Unit. Her tone was professional, not accusatory. I took my seat and folded my hands in front of me. The recorder was switched on with a soft click. The questions began simply. My name. My age. My ownership of the Collins farm. I answered clearly. When they asked about the beneficiary update, I described exactly what I had seen in the bank vault. I explained that I had not authorized any change to the policy and that I recognized inconsistencies in the signature. When they asked about the breaker replacement, I stated that maintenance appointments had been coordinated by my daughter-in-law during a period when I was handling church obligations and personal affairs following my husband's passing. I did not embellish. I did not speculate. I spoke only what I knew. The investigator asked whether I had given anyone written or verbal authority to act as property manager on my behalf. No, I said. The word landed firmly in the room. Daniel occasionally slid a document toward me for verification. Each page carried dates and digital timestamps. Emails requesting contractor services. Payment confirmations. Authorization forms routed through electronic systems. The pattern was quiet but clear. The work order originated from Rachel's email address. The payment came from the joint account she shared with David. The beneficiary update form had been submitted electronically 2 days after that maintenance invoice was processed. When the questioning ended, the investigator turned off the recorder. "Thank you for your cooperation," she said evenly. "We will proceed with further review." Outside, the afternoon sun had risen high. I walked to my car without feeling lighter or heavier. Only steadier. When I returned to David's house, both he and Rachel were waiting in the living room. Rachel stood first. "Well?" she demanded. I removed my purse from my shoulder and placed it carefully on the table. "They recorded my statement," I said. "They will continue their review." David searched my face for something he could hold on to. "Did they accuse anyone?" he asked. I met his eyes. "They are following documentation," I replied. Rachel crossed her arms tightly. "This is spiraling," she said. "If this turns into a criminal matter, do you understand what that means?" The word criminal echoed in the room, heavier than before. I did not raise my voice. "I understand that actions have consequences," I said. David looked at Rachel then, really looked at her, as if seeing a version of her he had not examined before. "Rachel," he said quietly, "did you sign Mom's name?" She hesitated. It was brief but visible. "I streamlined paperwork," she repeated, her tone defensive. She trusted me. I felt a small ache at that. Trust had once been assumed, not negotiated. "Trust does not transfer ownership," I said softly. Silence settled between us like dust after a storm. Rachel's composure fractured further. "I was trying to secure our future," she insisted. "The land is valuable. If something happened to you, David would have been left navigating chaos." I considered her words. "Chaos is not avoided by altering signatures," I said. David's shoulders slumped. "Why did you not just ask her?" he whispered. Rachel's jaw tightened. "Because she would have said no," she answered. The honesty in that sentence changed the air. It was not remorse. It was admission. I felt something final settle inside me. Not anger. Resolution. My phone vibrated in my purse. I glanced at the screen. It was Ethan. I did not answer immediately. Instead, I looked at my son. "I am returning to the farm," I said. "Even if it is only foundations and soil." David blinked. "With what money?" he asked. I allowed myself the faintest hint of a smile. "Investment," I said. Rachel's eyes widened slightly. "You cannot be serious," she said. I picked up my purse. "The insurer may take months," I continued calmly. "But my land does not need to wait for." Resolution to begin planning. I walked toward the door. David followed me onto the porch. "Mom," he said quietly, "are you leaving?" I paused at the top step and looked back at him. "I am not leaving," I said. "I am returning." The sky above the neighborhood was wide and clear, untouched by smoke. As I stepped down onto the sidewalk, I realized something with calm certainty. They had called me homeless. They had believed the fire erased my footing. But land is more than structure, and ownership is more than paperwork. The truth was moving through official channels now. Documentation was aligning. And whatever the outcome of the investigation, I was no longer standing in someone else's guest room wondering what had been taken from me. I was walking toward what was still mine.